How's everyone doing? Everyone doing good? I want to say thanks for staying tonight. We're happy to see you all. My name is Ed Hardison. I'm a character lead for the Far Cry 4 team. This is
Jason. I work on the project as well, senior character modeler, so that's all I gotta say. So I'm done, so it's late.
So what we thought we'd do first is we thought we'd show just kind of our E3 trailer that, I don't know if everyone saw it before, but we thought we'd introduce with that so you guys can kind of see what the stuff we're doing so you get an idea of what we're going to talk about. So.
Passport. Breathe. I'll do the talking.
Passport. Jaldi jaldi.
What's happening?
कहाँ से आ रहे हैं?
पटना बॉस।
पटना। पटना में क्या है?
परवाह है तो
बाढ़ में जा।
लेकिन हमारी रेंज में
मैंने कहा बाढ़ में जा। कुछ है? अभी तक कुछ नहीं।
कोई बात नहीं बॉस, कोई बात नहीं, ले लो।
चुप। मिल गया? कुछ मिल गया? आलो। चलो
बॉस
चलो।
अभी जाने हैं।
से निकलो। रुक! रुको! सबको डालो!
I distinctly remember saying, stop the bus. Yes, stop the bus. Not shoot the bus. I'm very particular with my words. Stop. Shoot. Stop. Shoot. Do those words sound the same?
But it got out of control.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
It got out of control.
Not out of control. I hate when things get out of control. One fucking job, but you couldn't fucking do that! And I got blood on my fucking shoes. At least there's a silver lining. We didn't completely fuck it up. Get up, boy. I'd recognize those eyes anywhere. I'm so sorry about this. This was supposed to be... well, not this. We have a party waiting for you, but I don't think I know your name. Who is this? Hmm? Is this your +1? Strong, silent type. I like it. I am terribly embarrassed about all of this. This was supposed to be very simple, but you know, if you give food to monkeys, they just throw their shit at each other. You know. Oh, would you hold this? For just a moment, I want to get a little picture right into the camera. There we are. Awesome. Don't worry about a thing, my boy. This will soon be behind us, and we'll be off on our grand adventure. Because I have cleared my calendar for you. You and I are gonna tear shit up!
Should I stay or should I go?
So that's a little bit what we're doing at in Montreal these days. So what we thought we'd talk about today are some of the techniques that we've been using to create these characters. Specifically today, I thought I would talk about some texturing techniques that we use to do some of the heads. So here I've got a head that I typically take to a certain percentage. I like to develop my head and my textures kind of at the same time so that you kind of have a coherency between the texturing and the modeling you're doing, so that as opposed to kind of creating a character and then projecting some images on top, I like to try and work both of these things at the same time. So, you know, you kind of develop the whole character at the same time. So what I've kind of done is gotten ahead to a point that, you know, I'm ready to start my texturing process. Like I've kind of worked my major forms to a point that I'm happy with, and now I want to start letting the textures start to dictate what the rest of this character is going to look like. So the first kind of phase in my process, obviously, is collecting reference. Reference is super important, and I'm just one of those people who really enjoy having lots and lots of reference. So I kind of just went to 3DSK and found this woman here. I really kind of like. You know, for me, what was interesting about her is that she's got a lot of nice things happening in her face. She's got a lot of, you know, kind of subtle texture, kind of variations and color changes and stuff. So for me, this is a good place to start, because I'm doing this on the side, right? So I don't really have a concept. Usually if you have a concept, you can kind of use that as a kind of a guide and to find what you're looking for. So the first step for me, obviously, is now that I've collected my reference, is to kind of prepare my reference for projections. So for me, that kind of one of the first steps that I tend to do is just go through and remove kind of all the extra elements that, you know, kind of make this woman stand out. I'm looking for something a little more generic, because inherently what I'm hoping to get from this process is just a nice base in which to start, you know, take it into to ZBrush and start painting and start to develop the details and the personality that I'm looking for. So for me, you know, the first step is to kind of go in and I start removing like major blemishes, anything like distinguishing like her lip piercing. I'm going through and starting to remove some of the lighting information. And for me, it's just really easy to do this stuff in Photoshop. I probably spent like, you know, 15, 20 minutes going through this whole file and removing all this stuff. So, you know, again, I just continue the process of coming in and removing, you know, for instance, any kind of weird highlights. She had these weird blemishes on her nose. So for me, I wanted to just try and get like a nice, even base. Again, just kind of coming in and refining, like, you know, the corners of her mouth, the lips, just lightening them up overall. Because really what I'm looking for is color information and kind of this small, pore level detail type stuff. Anything that kind of just adds a nice level of detail to my model. And finally, I come in and remove the shadowing around the neck. And then the next step, obviously, is, you know, I tend to like to just project from the front and side. And so I start with obviously the side and go through the same process, just removing blemishes, coming through and removing shadows, highlights, and, you know, just some further highlights in here. What I'm also doing at this point too is I'm taking notice of the size of my image, because ultimately what I'm going to want to do is set my document to these sizes here, so the 370, 404, and 56, 56. What I want to do is kind of come into my my Photoshop or my ZBrush document and reset my sizes here so that it fits with my actual image. And resize. Oh, I'm sorry about that. And it's going to give you the warning. Would you still like to read? Of course. Control menu. And then ultimately, zoom in this out. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that image as a backdrop, because what I want to do is line up this head with that image. What I'm basically trying to do here is create, for me, a projection document, so that in the process of projecting my images, if I need to come back and reproject something, or if I need to change something, like I have this file set up. So I've actually already done that process. So what I've done here is created this file here. Now what this file is, this is my resized document, and because I've saved it as a project file, I can actually come in here and I have my views saved. And the other nice thing about ZBrush with this is when you go to your save view, it also loads up your image at the same time. So you can see here what I've tried to do now is line my model up as closely to the image as possible, but without, obviously there's differences in the two heads. So what I'm eventually going to do, instead of actually coming in and projecting and reprojecting, I'll bring this image into Photoshop and liquefy, and basically what I want to do is make my image fit my model, so that I find that process allows me to keep more of the detail in the texture, and gives me a lot more to work with. So here I've kind of, got my two views based on my images, and really all I did was just kind of come in here, reposition, and then basically store my view, and then this is what it's given me here. So now that that's kind of ready to go, what I can do is another tip actually. You'll see every time you click on one of these views, it re-imports your image. So for me, what I do is I usually turn my image off, because when you go over to Z App Link, if you have your image turned on still, it puts it in the background and makes it difficult to actually see and work on your image. So what I've done here, obviously, is just sent this over. And usually what I will do, because I'm going to liquefy this document. The problem is right now with the size that it is, pixel-wise, it's very heavy, it's very intense. So what I usually do is I just change the size of my document. Well, let me drop my image first. I drop my image in here to get the right size. Let's trash these. So I'm basically just wanting to work with these two right now, and then what I'm going to do is resize my document. So it's just less heavy. Photoshop will process it faster, and when you go in and actually do your liquefy settings and stuff, you can actually go in and save your mesh. So show back. So in here, you can work with transparency on, and what I do is, so now you can see here, now what I can do is I can quickly start coming in and start moving around my image to fit my model. What I'm looking for, again, are kind of the anchor points for where I want to put. So I'm starting to do things like lining up my mouth, lining up my chin, kind of just pushing all my texture, basically where I want to start projecting all this stuff into place. And again, constantly just saving my mesh, because at some point you either might just, for whatever reason, something gets messed up. You can quickly come in and just load your mesh. So here I've actually got, so you can see what I was actually doing. This is essentially how it ends up turning out in the end. And although it's really weird looking and really kind of like, how does this even look like a person at this point? What's nice about this is because you've done it in Photoshop, it handles the pixels really well. So you can come in and after you've done a lot of these movements and stuff, you can actually kind of come in and just smooth it out, and you can see quickly like, it snaps your pixels back to 1:1 so that when you do your projection, you get something that's really crisp and clear, because ultimately that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to fit this image to my model, but at the same time create something that is nice looking and holds lots of detail. So at this point, I kind of just do an OK, and then let's see, where's history? What I'll do is save this out. So this is what I'm going to end up projecting. So I would save this out and put this as a new layer, and so that eventually, where's my history? Sorry. So what I'll actually do is I'll go back in and undo my file here. And then I will drop this back on. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong size. What I'll actually do is, go back to my original one and then load my front. So I'll get this. And then what I want to do is I want to take this image and then drop this onto my preserve. Range of ZBrush. And now I basically have a texture that fits pretty close to my head. I've only had to really do one projection, which is nice, instead of just constantly like reprojecting separate areas of the face or going in and just doing multiple layers of this. I've basically been able to accomplish kind of in one step how to get like the entire texture. And since I've increased my document so large, obviously it's a bit chuggy, but I mean you can actually see like it retains a lot of the information in there, and so it's nice. And since you do it 1:1, you don't have to worry about distortion of pixels and this sort of thing. Again, I would do this process, then I would then project the sides, and then after let's see, open, I'll show you what this looks like. I would project the sides, and then basically what I do is I export the front and I export the side as separate texture files and bring those both into to Photoshop, and then I'll start the process of combining those two together. And since I only usually project the one side, in games we're usually working with standardized meshes, so it's already got UVs. So my tendency is to just project one side, and then what I'll do is I'll just copy that one side over to the other side and use that as a base, because like I said, we're going to be taking this as the base level of your texture and building on there. So for me, it doesn't always have to be 100% accurate. It's really just, how quickly can I come up with something that is believable and has all the information I'm looking for. So I know this is kind of a lot of information to cover all at once. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. But here's ultimately what I'm trying to get. So this is after I've projected the front and I've projected the one side. I've gone through the same process and kind of just projected this over, and then, like I said, copied it in the UVs. You'll see that the two sides are exactly the same. But what this gives me is a nice base in order to start texturing from. I can see I'm starting to get a little clearer idea of who this woman is, of where I'm going with her. And now, it's all about the cleanup. So for me, I like to paint with her actual textures. I like to use her skin tones as kind of my palette. So what I do is I come into back into Photoshop. And what I'm looking for now is, I'm looking for skin tones, skin variations, and different areas of her skin that represents kind of different textures on her body. So, when I come down here, maybe I would take a swath of skin here as one of the skin tones that I wanted to work with. For her face, maybe, I like something in this area. I'm looking for something that's, got a lot of nice variation in it, but, obviously it needs to fit within a tonal range so that she stays consistent. I might also take, a bit of her forehead as well, and eventually just get these here. Actually, you can see, and you can see they're not very big, but what's nice about painting with these skin tones is that they have this variation in it. So as you start to build up your texture and stuff, you're always painting with variation. So your texture's never getting that flat. So you can see here, she's got some nice pore detail in this one. This one's a little flatter, but it's in the torso. It's more just kind of some coverage for the her torso area. And I've even taken a swath of, actually I've gone in and selected a separate neck so that I can kind of get this, you can see here in the neck, you get this really nice kind of skin and fat detail that you can then use and paint into your model. So once I've kind of done that, basically what I do is I just come in and import my textures. So I have all my skin samples here.
I got a question for you from the
Fire.
Twitter. Over here, Ed.
Yep, go ahead.
So George was asking, do you use scan data for base head modeling? Important for when you're working on characters?
Currently, I don't. We don't use scan data. I mean, I find that's something based on, really the project that you're kind of working on, I guess. For us on Far Cry, we didn't really have a whole lot of access to scan data. So it's not to say I haven't used it in the past, but on this particular project, we didn't do much with scan data. So no.
There's a question here from the audience as well.
Okay, go ahead.
When you project from the side, how do you keep that from obscuring your front projection?
I do them individually. So what I would do is I would do my front, and then I would clone, like I would take that poly paint, bake it into a texture, clone that texture, and then I would start over again with another kind of just white base head and then project from the side. And then bring those two in independently in Photoshop and blend them together. Obviously I don't want all this hair. She's missing spots on her face, on her ears. She's got part of her shirt in here. So at this stage, I'm really quickly, what I want to do is just kind of come in. Let me turn down the map.
Another question real quick from the
Yeah,
floor,
of course.
way over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this sort of the same method that you guys used for the environments in the game as well?
I don't know, I don't have a lot of exposure to how they're doing the environments. And to be honest, I've never even really worked with this technique very much before I got on this project. Like the nice thing about our team on Far Cry is we have a lot of really talented people and who are sharing ideas and stuff. So a lot of these techniques are a combination of tricks and stuff that myself, Jason, and some of the other guys on the team have just worked with and developed, and we just share, right? So it's kind of, whatever looks good and gets the job done really fast is what we're kind of looking to do. So as these techniques get developed, we share them, and you pick up the bits that work. And for me, I find that it has sped up my workflow. It's kind of changed the way, in a sense, that how I texture a lot of my stuff. Because, I mean, you can see here, like, as I've been talking to you, I've been looking at this and kind of just quickly drawing this in. And you can see I'm very quickly able to, paint out this shirt right here. And still have something that, although it's not super detailed yet, right? But it has variation in the skin. It's not just a flat texture. And it's, and I don't have to worry about, is it matching her skin tones? Because it's actually her skin tones. I can quickly come in here and, adjusting my RGB settings and stuff, quickly start to paint out these white areas. And then, I can work this stuff back in based on color. If that's too much, I can come down in here and start to work a little bit more. For me, I find it's better to always kind of work with less of an opacity and kind of work the texture in a little bit slow. Obviously for this, I'm kind of just quickly going through it. But as you build up on the texture, you can still keep, skin tones and things, for me, like I really like the little bit of red in her cheeks, but maybe I'm less happy with the darkness around her mouth, right? So I can kind of come in and then I can, using her skin tones, quickly kind of just lighten that up, but still maintain a lot of the detail, right? I can kind of come in here and with the, maybe with this guy here, start painting out some of her hair. And again, it kind of looks weird to start with, but as I come in, I'll start to work that back in a little bit more.
Another question here for you from the
Go
floor.
ahead.
Hi. I know you said you basically take two maps and you export them separately.
Yeah.
When you're re-importing that to ZBrush, how do you retain the detail?
I subdivide my model really high. I basically I use 4K maps, which is usually pretty excessive for what we're trying to do. So I'll use the 4K maps, and then I'll subdivide my model to, on this one it's 8.3 million polys. So for texturing purposes and around 4K, I find that it holds it. It holds it pretty well. I can still see at this level, I can see the kind of, the pore detail around her eyes and stuff. Even though it's a little bit blurry now because I've been working at the texture around the eyebrows, it still gets some pretty fine lines. So, I'll keep working this here. Let's see. And then what I'm looking to get is something like this. So this is kind of this is one that I've been working on for a little while now, and I've kind of started to remove all that information, right? Like I've gotten rid of, even though you can still see it a little bit, I've gotten rid of all the white holes. I've removed the hair. I've gotten rid of the dress, kind of come in and quickly just closed up in the holes and just started to try and feel out, what of this texture I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of. And then I continue this process, like this process continues on for a couple of iterations. So maybe at this point, I want to start getting rid of some of this, lighting information. She's got a lot of lighting information in her ears, a lot of lighting information around her eyes, and kind of all the areas in the images that were at extreme angles. You get a lot of shading and that sort of thing. So what I want to do now is basically start removing it. So with the same process, I even keep the same brushes and stuff. I just kind of come in here and start, maybe that's a bit much, but start removing some of this detail. Like in her image, actually, if I look, she does actually have dark eyes, so it's not something I want to get rid of completely, but as you kind of get into these areas here, like the recesses of the eye sockets and stuff, those are really susceptible to shading. So, what I would do is I would just, again, refining the detail, refining like the lighting information, and in some ways this step, starts to seem a little inherently backwards, because it seems like I'm pulling basically information out of my textures, right? I'm coming in, I'm lightening things, I'm evening stuff out, which is kind of not exactly what I tend to shoot for. I want variety and stuff, so it's inherently, for me, backwards, because I end up getting something like this here. And so for me, this is really just kind of her texture at a skin tone level. There's a little bit of lighting information that I've kept just for stylistic purposes, but for the most part, her skin tones are really flat. They're really, like here, this feels like it has a lot more information in it than what this does, but it's good to pull this information out because, theoretically with physical lighting in games, we should be able to achieve the shading information that we need. So at this point, I'm really just kind of looking to get rid of that excess information and then really start to focus on my texturing. At this point, maybe what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll start importing. I've got a list of alphas here that I will use to also kind of start creating more variation on her face. For instance, what I might do is, we talked about, I like those kind of red highlights earlier. So what I might do is, honestly, this is just one of the skin textures I had from her face before, and I kind of just put a hue and saturation on it and use that as now my new paint kind of texture. There's also this, I don't know how many people even know about this poly paint mode, but it's great. It gives you different options for how you want to paint with your textures. So obviously you have your standard, but you can use colorize, you can use multiply, lighten and darken. So based on what you're wanting to do with your texture, and because I know, Paul, I know you mentioned this before, but it's, if you go into under brush, it's under alpha and texture. There's this poly paint mode. So you can use this to start painting in different ways. So for instance, maybe I'll go to colorize and use this to kind of, I'll jump it up so you can see, because I don't think you can see on the screen that well, but let's see.
We got a question here from
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
floor.
Sure. But you can see quickly, like you can start to get, obviously I've just done this so you can see what it looks like, but you can use this as kind of a way to bring color and to bring variation. So what I'd actually do is I'd probably use it with, a different alpha, kind of adjust, and then slowly start to, you can see here, it's great because it gives you this variation you're starting to look for, right? Obviously this is a bit extreme, but what I would do is I would just kind of come in and start putting on layers and layers of this to try and bring out some of this rosiness back in the cheeks.
Question, since you're working in such high resolution, I noticed that you're doing the drag out of the textures.
Sure.
Don't you get a variation in the sizes of the pores and the kind of...
You do get variation, but for me, that's why I'm doing it, is that right now I'm not really paying it, like it's a very early base. What I'm eventually going to do is use all this variation in the texture to kind of do do an inflate and kind of push out the detail on the face. And then I will use that as kind of the basis for how I want to start that next level of modeling detail on her face. So like the fat pockets and the wrinkles and all this stuff. So the variation in the pore size at this point for me is a plus, I guess, in that sense, because it helps me give the skin variation that I need. At this phase too, I would probably start doing some hair for this woman as well. And since this was a texture exercise for me, I kind of just, what I wanted to do was give her, let's see, so I chose this woman here as kind of my reference, right? She's, just see if I could texture a bald head in ZBrush. So what I've done is, with the same process as doing the skin, I come in here and basically what I want to do is take a swath of her hair, right? So, I chose a piece on the side. I chose a piece on the top as well to kind of just get variations in her hair. So I've got this, this piece here. This is actually from the top. Everyone's kind of got that little spiral from which it starts. So then I basically load these up, and with the same process, turn my poly paint mode. I can come in here and quickly start painting in some hair on this woman. And based on the image, right? Like I want to try and make sure that the hair flows in the same, general vicinity that she's got. So, I'm constantly, repositioning it, and maybe I'm even, flipping it over based on the other side. So if I want to make sure that it follows the direction. And obviously I'm doing a really kind of crappy job at it right now, but with a little time and effort into it, you can get something that starts to look like, this is obviously after I've spent some time with it. So now I've painted her head. I've actually kind of come in and started doing, a lot of that directional hair flow. I've come in, I've painted in that, that kind of spiral from the top. I've also kind of started just iterating on the skin texture a little bit more. You can start to see, like, obviously it's not there yet, but I've started to introduce some darks to it. I've started to introduce some more highlights to the character, and all, again, just to get some of that variation, because at this point what I would do is I would want to, now I want to, let's say for instance, bring my texture over to the modeling side of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new texture from this so that I can essentially kind of just mask this off, and usually I mask by intensity.
So there's a question on Twitter, I think there's a good one from Taeyon. Do you ever color correct your images so that there is no shadow detail? And if so, how do you do that?
I don't tend to do that often. I usually, to get rid of the shadow detail, again, I kind of just do that first pass in Photoshop. But really what I'm trying to just kind of, do it as quickly as possible so that I can just work more detail. So I try and, remove as much as possible from the actual Photoshop images to start with, and then, through that process there, just paint out the extras that I don't think looks that good. So yeah, that's kind of how I go about it. So now I've created this layer, and now basically what I'm going to do is, now on a layer, maybe I'll do it one more time just to exaggerate it a bit so you can see. Now I've kind of gone in and added that detail to my model. If I turn off my mask. So now you can see like all that texture variation and stuff I was telling you about before. I've actually been able to come in and, although it's rendering a little weird, get that detail into my actual model. And for me, this is actually a little bit easier to start kind of sculpting on that next level of detail, because it gives me, it's like the first stroke on a blank canvas is the most difficult. So now I've kind of avoided having to do that first stroke. Now I've got something that's already working with my texture, and now I can kind of come in and adjust it. So one little tip though, usually the problem with the inflate is that it tends to basically inflate your entire, not just the details, but your entire model. So what I tend to do is actually, let me turn off I turn off my layer, and basically what I want to do is create a morph target of the head before my inflate. So I'll turn that off.
There's a question on the floor while we're waiting for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
With the hair that you painted with patches,
sure.
something like that, why did you choose to do it like that over projecting the whole area of the hair, which is a big area, the back of the head, for example, or on the top?
I mean, I could have. I mean, that's a perfectly good way of going about it. But for me, it's, I don't know, part of it is because this is a texturing exercise, so I wanted to see, like, how well I can, I could texture it just in ZBrush. And the other for me is I just have more control over it. If you don't come across an image that is the perfect images, of the side of the head or something that you want to work with, for me, this was really easy to kind of just come in and, let's say, for instance, I could just select, I did actually, but select this area and then use that to paint with. It just gives, me as the artist a little more freedom to kind of customize the head that I'm working on. So that's the only real reason I've done it. It's just for, sake of personalization, So let's see. Wait. Go back. So basically I turn this layer back on, turn record back on, and then what I want to do is go all the way back down. I stored the morph target for the first, and you'll see here as I switch, you can see that right there. See, and although it's a small little difference, but I mean, for us in games, making sure that it sits and fits on the rig is important. So what I'm basically doing is I'm switching to my head beforehand, and then that way when I turn up back to where I was, I'm able to retain all the skin level detail, but without actually inflating the overall size of the head. So you can see here now the head is back to where it was. And that's kind of what I use as my starting point from here on out to kind of start working out the modeling. So the next pass for me is kind of, again, just working that next level of detail. So you can see here that, I've kind of started adding in more, I started adding in more of the fat. I've started adding in a little more of the pore detail. You can see it a little bit better here. I've started working in directional pores. I've started working in some of the wrinkles in the forehead. Started working in, again, just a lot of directional things. Getting more, before I was showing you the image, I was able to project that image down here and then use that to kind of come in and sculpt in fat packets and just the kind of wrinkle in the skin you would expect to see, and just try and give, my final output usually is for games. So what I'm trying to do is create basically an undulation across the surface, so to try and help break up specularity and that sort of thing. So, again, I just continue to work the process. I come in and start refining the hair, working it back in a little bit more, again, adding more details into the texture. I also start making passes on getting the hair actually into the model at this point. I'm, adding in, for normal maps and stuff, I'm adding in hair. I've come in here and sculpted in the lips and stuff a bit. And this is all information that, because I'm doing it back and forth at the same time, I can mask also a cavity of the lips now and bring that information back into my texture detail. So again, always just trying to work towards getting something that's cohesive and works well together. And at the same time, just refining my process, right? Like I've started coming in and adding in kind of these stray pores, trying to, you got areas of larger pores that tend to be around the forehead and on the nose and chin and stuff. So I've started to work that back in, and again, just like you said, you can see I've started to work that stuff back into my texture to try and get something that's...
Question right here in the front row for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for the bumped texture process, what if you had the entire body? Would you go about it the same way, or would you rather separate it?
I probably would go about it the same way, but I would separate it. I would probably take it, it really depends on what my output's going to be, right? Like it really depends on what I'm actually, what the final product's going to be. Like, if I knew I was showing this in an actual game engine as opposed to like in ZBrush, I probably would have been a little bit more intense on my details and stuff, because in games you tend to just lose a bit. So, I really kind of try and work the model based on how it's actually going to be viewed. And since I know, we're just doing a kind of a live demo here for ZBrush, that, I've not done some things maybe that I normally would have done if I knew the final output was going to be for a game or something. So hopefully that answers your question.
But our game mesh is split generally, so
yeah.
It's easier to work, especially when you're dealing with high polys. If you would have entire body, it's usually eat up polys really quickly, especially we don't have 64-bit yet. So
yeah.
After that, we'll we can talk. But
and then honestly, that process, without boring you too much with it, that process actually kind of just continues back and forth until, at some point you just got to call the ball on it and say you're done with it. So, you know, if it were with work or whatever, I have a concept that I work towards, and then I kind of just work it until I get there. And so then, then it's about presentation to your art director or whoever. So, maybe you throw like a couple quick lights in the scene, and here I've just thrown like a quick skin shader on here, and, just tried to get something that, I've on this mod, I've kind of, put some makeup around her eyes and stuff so that we can kind of, just start to get a sense of personality. I've added eyes, I've kind of come in and maybe even with the shader worked a little bit more the coloring and that sort of thing. So again, this is all part of this process is kind of just for me to kind of get it to the next stage, which is, at this point, I would probably export my map. If my art director or whoever is approving this is happy with where it's at, the next level of work for me kind of just starts in Photoshop, where now I'm starting to really work the texture. I'm using my normal maps and other maps that are created to kind of, continue refining. So, just to kind of show you where it was to start with. You kind of have this guy here. Sorry. So that's kind of, just in summary, this is kind of where it starts, and then, I'll show you without the. This one here. And then the final step obviously would be with the textures, right? So, and then here's the final one, right? So that's kind of where it would end up. So that's kind of the process I would use to, like I said, just kind of finish out my heads, or at least get a good jump on my texturing process, and then kind of work the details later based on what my output is. So that's it. So
This is the hunter. It was shown, so I can show it. So this is actually one of the first models I worked on when I started the project, and I was just kind of trying to kind of get a feel for the look, kind of exaggerating a bit of they're kind of going for more of a more extreme, really lived-in clothing, really dirty. So I'm just going to actually kind of show you the process. A lot of times we start with, of course, the base mesh, and we would end up bringing in, you could actually, some guys would kind of build off of like a max file or whatever, but I tend to just kind of work with primitives or something. So I would probably end up just append a cylinder, which is a great tool, by the way. And then I'm just going to actually build a sleeve or something. It's something pretty, I think I could do in whatever, 40 minutes or something, but we'll find out. So I just kind of bring it down to a size I'm kind of happy with, and I'm hoping, yes. And it's, especially with clothing and stuff, it's kind of good to kind of get a good cheat sheet of what you want to model, what you're going to work. So the kind of fabric, it's kind of a good idea to kind of have it, like usually have 2 monitors or something. So, but in this case we don't. So and usually when I work, I'm pretty quiet, so I apologize in advance. So, but so I just kind of like loosely place the cylinder, obviously, and then just kind of start moving it into place before I start like Dynamesh it. Transparency is also very good because when it's not activated, it kind of blocks the move tool. So this is a good way to kind of rough something in pretty quick. So. And yeah, so it's kind of good enough, I guess. And we're done, so that's not quite. So I'm just gonna remove, I did this little fray, but I'm just gonna kind of pretend he didn't have it or something. Like, a lot of times we'll get a concept, and then, especially when you're doing like factions or kits per se, so these guys have to be kind of swappable. So I know some guys don't like working that way, but it's the nature of the gaming industry where you kind of have to make stuff that works. And I kind of like to use the slash tool a lot. /2, it kind of works. You kind of, if you bring the opacity down, you could just kind of dig in some detail pretty quick. So kind of just block in the shape really quickly or something. It's going to be really simple sleeve, by the way. So it's and then also like trim dynamic. Just build in some shapes. The other thing I noticed working with ZBrush is you can really customize your UI, so it's really nice to have your favorite tool and interface, but it also makes it kind of hard when you're working on someone else's tool set. So it's a good thing we kind of brought our own. It's not really so especially for cloth or something, can be a little tricky to kind of get where you want the fabric to go. So sometimes you have a little feel out time where you just go back and forth of where you want the stuff to go. So I'm probably going to put a seam underneath where logically that would happen or something. So let's just say he's got a rolled sleeve or something here. When it gets to a point too, sometimes I just like to zero mesh it to kind of get a flow. And pretty much every part would kind of go through the same process. So this is just a micro example of
My name is Ian. Thank you for taking my question.
I didn't take it yet, so.
Thank you for hearing my question.
Okay, yeah, done.
I was just wondering about the general sort of, I don't know if theoretical is the right word, but the general approach to sort of the rules of wrinkles. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned from experience or what you've learned from other resources?
Okay, Well, there's many ways, I guess, to kind of tackle it, but I like to kind of think of fabric as paper in a way. So it's very, generally deal with more the tension line. So where's something going to start and where's something going to finish. So it's kind of, so a lot of times you'll kind of get this like this little shape in here, but it's generally like, yeah, tension. So, and then it's also just observation of like, or photo reference. So like, and how it's going to translate in the game, because sometimes you'll get a really nice reference. You're like, wow, that's great, and then the full just does not work there or something. So example, you'd always have to like looking at knees or something, you'd always have to have something where it's going to bend or something, and until we had like deformable like normal maps or blending or something like that. So let's just, I don't I don't know if that answered your question or not, but.
He said thank you. Yeah, he's thankful. He's here in the red light.
So I was wondering, you are sculpting this whole thing out of a cylinder, which doesn't have a thickness, or is like one thickness, but your other pieces have thickness, I think, right? So how do you approach that, and
for example,
also
the
later
pants are,
in skinning those things?
For example, excuse me?
And how do you approach those, like a jacket with thickness when you skin it later?
Oh, well, we'd end up building the low-res on top of it after, so we would actually have to have, we would go in and build like 2 sides or something. Like this is just actually a single mesh. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
yeah,
I was wondering.
In the low-res, we'd end up sculpting the other side just to kind of fill the caps, or we could hit like double-sided or something, so we'd only need one side or something.
Hey, one more here in the front part of the building. Go ahead and state your name.
I'm Giovanni.
Giovanni.
I was wondering, is it difficult for you to make differences in material, like one silk, leather, and or like is it how do you approach that, getting the differences in materials?
Getting into the thickness?
No, I think what he's asking is
type of materials.
How do you differentiate between the materials? Get that sort of feeling. Is that cool?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's just like thick. It goes with like cloth thickness, and like so leather would be a really heavy or wool or something. So you have larger shapes where these guys have really like chaotic, like a lot of like lived-in messy clothes. So you would end up you'd have a lot less. You just have to kind of think of it as bigger shapes rather than smaller like. Like this, for example, this is like more of a shirt material or something. So it would have definitely a little more like tensions and little irregularities. Where something larger you could kind of have smoother shapes. Almost sometimes you don't also have to have any wrinkles at all or something. So especially on like if it was a coat or something as leather, unless it was of course bunched up. But honestly, you just kind of look at a lot of reference. You look at some scan data. You look at like just some really nice stuff online where you can really get good references, and then you just try and get something the art director's happy with too. So that's always fun.
I know this other gentleman in the front row, Tom May, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead.
So I was just wondering, to back up Beat's question, when you're working with open components like the vest, do you start that as like a plane, or do you work at both sides at once? And if you work at both sides at once, how do you keep it from collapsing?
This was actually, it's like I did 1.5 years ago, so I'm trying to remember how I tackled it. This was, yeah, so basically this is actually, this one was actually built in Max, I believe. So this actually, I think, I took someone else's base mesh and then I just kind of added a hoodie on top of it. So, but as far as like capping or something, I wasn't really too concerned with it. It's because at the end of the day, it's like the lower is what you are going to sell. So as long as it looks kind of good, like from the standpoint, you can do the other side after or something like that.
Another one here in the middle.
I know that you guys basically make the low res mesh on top of the high res mesh and then bake the textures. For something that's so wrinkly and as like a cloth, and for soft fabric, there's going to be a lot of undercut wrinkles. Do you guys avoid that, like just to avoid baking, or you actually model it so that make sure that the undercut is like actually modeled into the low res mesh to match that?
It depends on your polygon budget, actually. So ideally, we can, if we can add some of the actual geometry, we will. But if not, we will just bake it, and it'll might look a bit flat in some situations. But generally, like you can, if you can get a nice normal map or something, it'll hold. So.
Oh geez.
Crap. Sorry.
Way in the back. Way in the back. It's like the Epic of Gilgamesh to get back here.
Hello, my name is Joyce. I was just wondering, what are the brushes you primarily use for sculpting clothes?
Okay, well, the /2, which I said, like it's really nice for getting some really deep folds and stuff. Of course, like also the move is good for everything, just because you can really just push some of this geo in really quickly if you just mask or something, and then like I want to have this little rolled cuff or something, and there's really damp standard is I think everyone uses because it's just really nice to kind of get a nice sharp line, and then you can kind of go over the top and you kind of pick some peaks and valleys while you're doing it. So.
Got someone else here that wants to talk to you for a second.
Hi, since we seem to be... Oh, good. Okay.
Other than that, just basic brushes. Yeah, the damp standard's good. Like, it's just, I don't really do any, like, there's probably like 4 brushes, really. Standard, damp standard, trim dynamic, and the /2, pretty much, and the move, pretty much does everything. And then when you're doing like the fine stuff at the end, then you can, I made a couple of brushes here, like from a denim or something, or this I just did like a MRGB grab. I created a stitch or something, so you get like something like a surge steam or something, which a lot of people have made. And the other thing we use to kind of get some good information, we can create using the surface modifier. We can kind of get some nice because we use the detail maps for the game, just because. Well, it's just budget, and it kind of holds some nice detail. So in ZBrush, we can kind of previs and kind of show what it's going to look like. For example, like on this wrap thing, and you could just easily like, if you edit it, you could just like you could load your own custom, and then there's also like this whole noise plug thing, which you end up creating something like I think. Another guy in the project created like this camo pattern, so it's really nice because you can just end up copy this or something, and if you want to paste it on there, I think it should work, or maybe it won't in my case. Okay, I pasted the wrong thing. Copy. Okay. Sorry, copy. And sorry, I'm selecting the wrong mesh.
What's that? There's one more over here, if it's cool. Go ahead.
Okay. So since cloth seems to be the topic of this discussion, I was just curious if...
Well, it's only that, sorry.
Yeah.
It's the characters that they wear a lot of clothes, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a character artist, you're going to be dealing with this all the time. So not to take the topic off of ZBrush, because it's awesome and you're doing a great job, but but I know there's a couple or at least studios that are using another piece of software called Marvelous Designer, which
What's
is
that?
Fabric Simulator.
Marvelous what?
Yeah. Anyway, I was curious if you guys were implementing that in your pipeline at all, or even to use as a starting point before you start sculpting.
Some guys do use it. I have used it on a couple pieces, but I ended up having to do so much rework to kind of get what they wanted. I kind of abandoned it, but some guys are actually pretty efficient in it. So it's kind of it's good, really good for some areas, but I don't know. I find it's. I don't know. It's for me. This project is a good like exercise to kind of practice my cloth, and I had the opportunity, so I kind of just I went with it, and it's kind of we also were able to kind of stylize the folds a bit more because it kind of gives it a little more life than like the. Like when the stuff you get out of Marvelous is you know it's Marvelous. It's really nice. Like you got some nice little corners and stuff, but it's generally pretty clean. So kind of getting like this really chaotic cloth or something. I don't know. I think we had more issues with it than not. I think so. Because at first it's like, oh, make it look like super real, and then you kind of do some pre-calculated like Marvel's Designer stuff, but then it's like, whoa, that looks kind of weird, and then especially like on joints or something, it really wasn't working for us. So, but.
I got another floor question over here on the wall. Yeah. Whoo, I'm going. We're gonna hit the Twitter next.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of baking the normals? Any considerations that you recommend?
Like in ZBrush or like in general, or?
Well, you tell me. How do you do it?
That was a snappy comeback. That was a good one.
That's a good one.
Do you want to know what their engine you mean for their engine, or just in general for him? In their engine. More about you guys and what you do at UB Montreal.
The engine is it's an interesting one, but I've been kind of getting some pretty decent results when I would kind of bring a mesh to like a 3/4 stage, and then I would retopologize it. I'd get good UVs on it, and then basically the workflow ended up being we would get a nice base mesh of that's going to be the actual silhouette, the shape that the art directors can kind of verify within the engine. So we would quickly we would knock something like this out, and then we would once they were pretty happy with the overall shape, then we would bring it into the engine. We would actually build a low res, and then once that's approved, I would actually import the retopologize, reproject the whatever detail I already had on top of the correct topology mesh, and then I would finish the sculpt on that, and then I'd actually have one-to-one bakes because it's the same mesh, right? And then with ZBrush you can actually use the multi map exporter, and so you can if you want to do your poly paint or something, you could get your first your first pass of colors. You can get your occlusion, you can get some normals, and then sometimes you'd also mix it also with X normals or some other baking software to kind of get something pretty good. So, and also the project they really liked really crisped normals. So sometimes you would go into Photoshop, and then you would also add a few more surface details and stuff. So I'm just going to I'll just call it good enough for now. And
so there is something coming in on the Twitter feed.
Okay.
From Eric Sala. Do you handle the fringe details with alphas for game res, or
Do you have what?
Do you handle fringe details? I'm supposing he means the ends of pieces
Oh, yeah,
of
they're
cloth,
alpha.
for instance.
They're
They're all
alpha,
handled with
yeah.
alphas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So wherever-
What's good with what I've been doing with ZBrush is I would actually build out my, like a decent alpha or something. Like, for example, I would...
Hey, how you doing? My name is Ulysses, and this is pretty much a question, I guess you could say it's personal probably, maybe for you guys, but this goes for both of you guys. I was wondering, since you guys are a big game company, right? With the amount of like deadlines and...
We are? I thought we're kind
well,
of...
I mean...
We're
with
independent.
with the amount of, you know, the stress and the deadlines that you guys have, I'm assuming, how do you guys deal with it in your own personal life?
Good question. Good question. I'm still working that one out. So, no, it's basically you have a good managed team, and the character team is doing generally, like, as far as like having to do overtime or something. I think we've been managing our time pretty good. We've had, you know, I think any project, like, out of all the studios I've been at, it's always like a learning experience of what people want and how to deal with it. So and as far as, you know, going at home, you know, you just got to leave. Sometimes you just got to leave some stuff at home, or leave it at home. No, leave it at work, and then you go home and, you know, hang out with your kids or something. And
for me, I try and get out from in front of the computer as much as possible. Try and get out and just, I don't know, I run, I do photography, I do other stuff that isn't sitting in front of ZBrush and doing this all the time. Because, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of stress, and depending on how your project's going, there's obviously different levels of stress. You know, as character artists, we're actually pretty fortunate in terms of the game pipeline. Like, we don't tend to have a lot of dependencies. So for us, on most of the projects I've been on, not to say they weren't some levels of high stress at times. For the most part, you know, the fact that you're not really dependent upon anyone to get what you need done is really just, do you have good artists? Do you have what you need to get the project done? You either have the concept and that sort of thing, and you just bang it out. So, you know, we're kind of fortunate in that sense. But, you know, I think everyone just kind of, you know, for me personally, like I said, I just try and get out from in front of the computer and do other stuff. So.
Good try. Oops. So yeah, I was just going to show, where was he at? So this is, pretend I actually spent time out with it, but I would actually end up creating an alpha from here, like, and then I would actually make an insert mesh, so I could show like the, yeah, here's the insert. So I could show like the fray I did, right, and like from the insert mesh, but then I'd also actually have the alpha created with, I'd use the mask, and then I would probably even export out the tool and then just project it or bake it. So with the information, but at least we'd have kind of a good representation also in the game.
Hi, my name is Renato. I would like to know in the production line, in the pipeline, what are the main difference between the last generation, this new generation, about texture and material per character, draw call controls, the main difference about the...
Sorry, I
So the main
caught half of that.
difference-
I'm kind of...
The main difference between the last generation and this generation?
Yeah, PS3 and
PS3
PS4.
and PS4. What are the differences in the
Okay.
workflows associated with the last generation and this generation?
Well, there's definitely more expectations of what they want. And meeting those expectations is also kind of, and the thing is, it's so new. It's happened with the last generation when they came in. It's just like, oh my God, look at all this stuff it can do. And then it's like, well, I guess it can't, you know, so they're like, you know, it's like kitchen sink, you can do this, you can do this, you have a kajillion polygons, you know, we have everything. And then it's like, oh wait, everyone has, you know, then you got your environment to contend with, you got animation, then they want to have a better lighting model, and then it's like, whoa, that eats up a lot of memory. So we ended up chipping away and it kind of we're still left, I think we get more polygons and we get better texture maps, and then hopefully a few better shaders that we can deal with. But that's also, at least on this project, we've been doing a lot of like iteration on and back and forth and how to get something that looks better, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of.
And I think at this level we don't even really fully understand what the next generation of characters look like. It's the immediate effect, right? Is that we have higher poly counts, we have higher texture counts, and so I mean, just with those two things alone, we're able to bring a lot more stuff in. But I think as the dev cycle continues to grow and we move further into this next generation, you're going to start to see more things like, with procedural materials that basically you're painting by numbers, you're assigning material values based on maps, and watching how all that kind of next-gen tech starts to develop, whereas before, subsurface used to be such, having subsurface scattering running in real time was just like, holy crap, can we actually do that? And now it's starting to become like pretty standard practice for most games. So I think as, we're not even fully aware of what we'll be doing with characters, yet, because, we all, it's a community, right? And as the community starts to develop things and information gets out, other people will take that information and to develop it further. So I think we're just, for us, the immediate effect is higher textures and higher poly counts, but, the long-term effects, I don't think we've even fully seen yet, so.
True. I'm just sticking in, it doesn't make any sense why there'd be a frayed mesh, but I'm just kind of showing basically what I did before, which is on up here, which kind of makes more sense. So, but I'm just kind of just for demonstration's sake, just putting it in there. So bear that in mind. And I'm also starting to break the symmetry on this. So I'm just gonna show another. I don't know if it's interesting or not, but just showing. Kind of breaking, if say the dude's got a hole or something in his, because he's out there a lot and he doesn't get a, change. I don't know. He's.
Got another question right here in the middle of the floor for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm double dipping here. Since the new gen technology came in, with all the SSS running at the real-time stuff, do you guys just run that as basically the shader to take care of that, or do you actually create new maps, like SS map, different layers to actually, something that, on the film end that something would do like a, actual render?
Sure. It's a little bit of both, right? Like you have the ability to do the SSS with the actual shader itself, but for instance, you can use maps to define where it happens. For instance, in some game engines, maybe they don't have the ability to calculate accurate SS or subsurface scattering, so they fake it with with code and with the shader, and then they use the maps to kind of define the areas in which it happens. So it really just depends on the engine that you're in. So.
Yeah, so just digging into the mesh for if you want some holes or something, pretty simple stuff, but it kind of gives them a little more well, right now it still looks pretty much the same, but you would say who wanted. Sometimes watching paint dry, I'm sorry, but it's drying, it's drying.
Here's a question for you then from the Twitter, from Theo Mills. How do you handle modeling the different parts of a piece of clothing? For example, the panels with the seams of a jacket?
I tend to, that's something I'll figure out early on, like I would, like for the pants or something, I would, actually I might have a little, oh crap, all this stuff's up here. I would actually cut in like where, like I kind of would lay out like foundation lines of where, how I want the clothes to look. Like if there's, for example, if this guy has these, well, pointing here, like pockets or something, I would kind of start cutting in, like you maybe use a dance standard to kind of, almost like a sketch, and then I would start digging it in. And this is usually with a Dynamesh stage or something. Like this is really, so this is like the pants, and it's a crazy long video, so I'm just gonna, so basically you see it's a cylinder. I ended up, oh, I jumped ahead really quick. You know, so here is kind of where I would actually start cutting in some of the, or maybe not. Eventually I will, I think. So here, yes, I start cutting in some of the main areas, like where the pockets would be. I very early on, I kind of would draw in like maybe like the exterior pockets, and then I just start roughing in, like getting a feel for where, how I wanted it to fold and where I wanted the cloth to break.
So DG wanted to know on Twitter as well, do you, did you study drapery, or are you just kind of winging it now at this point?
Yeah, I'm totally winging it right now, so it's, I worked on a lot of cloth on this game. The game before I was at THQ, and there was just a lot of cloth on that. So I looked at a lot of cloth. Unless he's saying like I don't know how to model cloth, then I'm sorry, then I am totally winging it. So yeah, so it basically it comes down to like just details at the end where it's just like stitches, and I've been using panel loops to kind of, I would actually just cut in right there. So I would just extract the mesh. I'll use panel loops, and then I can start I'll delete what I don't need, and then I would just kind of start placing it. Then I'd end up using the surface modifier to kind of get a nice, like a gauze or a bandage look, and it kind of would get something pretty quick, and it's right on the mesh, so it's really nice to kind of, you're not kind of futzing with it. Sometimes I'd use the curve, like the curve, what's it called? Strap as well, but sometimes it can flip on you, and especially when you're doing full loops, and when it's not a full cylinder, or if it's offset, sometimes I wasn't getting amazing results. So that's basically, I tackled it with this way, and I was pretty happy with what I got. So, and what's nice is it creates these separate loops, right? And then if you go into move with the topology, so it basically would just end up grabbing just like one. So like, and then if like, I want this just one strap down there, you know, instead of grabbing the whole like mess or something. And so then you could actually start overlapping, and you kind of get something really quick. Yeah, so also it's, you know, it's a good way to kind of get variance of so if you want, like when you're building out like a faction or a whole like an army, it's kind of nice to have these options. So we would actually use the layering system quite a bit. We'd use the multi-sub, so we'd have like different like pants. Sometimes we would end up like for example, if we needed to be really economical with like the pants, we'd basically build one leg, and then we would like seam it like right in the middle or something, and then we'd actually have another layer with like, let's say he had a knee pad or something, so we would end up modeling like this, because the cloth would end up going in, get bunched up, so we'd end up having, so we'd have both versions on the same mesh, and then when we would bake it out, we'd actually only have to bake out that area, because we would actually have, this one actually has bad loops on it, but pretending this was actually looped well, we would actually just have like, for example, like a chunk and then we would make sure it integrate, and then you'd have this piece, and then it would fit seamlessly. It would work pretty good. So it's all, you know, it's a video game, so you have to be really, you have to kind of think ahead of how you're gonna optimize kind of on the fly while you're going. But with ZBrush, it's really nice because we can really think that out ahead of time, and with the layers, it's easy to bring in other layers if you want, or even if you can duplicate layers and stuff.
I'll ask you something from the Twitter feed.
Okay.
Have you ever considered going into fashion? That was, I think, a serious question they were sending in, literally.
Yeah, it's coming from
It's a true
Terry.
story. He's not looking like I'm lying. I'm not lying.
I'm
thinking about it right now, right at this very
What's
second.
the person's name here?
I wish I was doing some fashion right
Terry
now.
wants to know if you've considered, this is a legitimate question coming off of the Twitter.
Okay.
Terry wants to know, Terry Michaels,
Okay.
wants to know if you've ever considered becoming a fashion designer after modeling a character like that. Which is a legitimate,
I'd say no. I'd say no.
Well,
maybe earlier on, I was actually like, oh, you know, it's clothes are awesome. I wanna.
Well, if you think about it, you know, UVs in essence, you know, my fiance is a fashion person, so she has to write all. If you look at it, we're doing the opposite. They're starting flat, making 3D.
Yeah.
We're starting 3D, then we want to put UVs.
Yeah.
My wife is
actually a tailor, so
interesting.
It's funny you ask because she does all that, and I don't want to step on her toes, right? So, but basically, I start with her. I understand a lot more of how the construction of clothes, because she always would tell me how badly something's sewn together. So sometimes I would come with these weird questions to her. I'm like, that's not how a dress jacket should look. It should have like this kind of seam. And they're like, no, just do it like the concept. I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense. But you end up, you do what, you know, you do what you're told. So, and then, in both places. So.
You're cheating. You're learning at home.
Huh?
You're cheating. You're
Yeah,
learning
you
at
know,
home. It's
you
like
know,
fashion by day, fashion by night.
You learn where you can, right? On the fly. So that's, I don't know. That's about it. Like it's just obviously these this. I would probably spend a little more time on these cuffs or something, but and everyone knows, like, you know, you would come in and like just kind of start detailing, like stitch detail on that, but that's just at the very end, and that's just like, I don't know, it's well, details for detail, but honestly you want to make sure you kind of the bigger shapes read first. So and that's another thing, like we want to really make sure we had this like strong silhouettes on some of our characters. So I'm kind of jumping all over, but you know, it's how my brain works. It's kind of random. What's that?
That northern water you're drinking.
That's it. Yeah,
it's the good water.
The same stuff.
The pure water.
Right? It's more oxygen to the
Pure
brain.
Montreal air.
Right?
And the poutine.
That's right.
It helps.
The classic.
Yeah, so that's it. Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we done?
Yeah.